Absolutely. You will see very strong issuance when it comes to IPOs, and I'll address your question in 2 points. The first point is that so far year to date, you've seen $1.5 billion in issuance. After the Sbines IPO, this will get to $2 billion. But remember that the window for execution was interrupted, of course, by the Eid break and by Ramadan. And this is normally a very busy window. For the next phase of IPOs, there are much more private companies coming to the market, so the IPO pipeline is positive. I think there are IPOs coming in sector, in healthcare, consumer, retail, and tech, which will continue that pipeline both in Saudi Arabia and the UAE. We always speak about Saudi and the UAE, but the rest of the region is also opening up. So we saw Oman potentially coming to the market with a number of IPOs, and we really hope that the rest of the region will open up as well.
And we're speaking about a solid economic performance for those equities, but despite that, we still see that GCC or MENA equities in general are sort of underrepresented in global portfolios. Why is that the case?
That's a good question. For two reasons, honestly for two reasons, and I'll be honest with your audience. The first one is we're not allocating well international investors. The local investor base is very important. You cannot price a Saudi IPO, you cannot price a UAE IPO without the strength of the local investor base. This is very important. Retail, family offices, and local institutions are needed to be able to price an IPO and for this to trade well. But when international investors are coming in, they're doing the work early, they're giving you clarity on valuation, they're giving you clarity on ticket size, and then when you price the IPO, they get a very small allocation. So on that basis, if they have such a big emerging market fund, and you're giving them such a small allocation, obviously that percentage, like you mentioned, will be low. Now, number two, that's the second part of your question. For international investors to increase exposure and to invest, and for that percentage to be higher, they have to invest in the secondary market. What you don't see today is you don't see a lot of X-rated book builds. You don't see a lot of fully marketed offerings. You don't see exchangeable bonds, convertible bonds. That is slowly happening, but we should do much more in the Middle East. So we have to work with the regulator and exchanges to promote these products to allow international investors to continue investing in the secondary market.
So could we potentially say that regulators are not doing enough so far?
In fact, regulators have done a lot. Credit to the regulators. The regulation on IPOs is in line with international standards. Look at the IPOs we do in Saudi, look at the IPOs that we do in the UAE. This is really in line with the international standards. There is nothing needed when it comes to IPOs. But with secondary market, we have seen drafts regulation coming out. So it's only a matter of time before we see the official regulation coming out on X-rated book builds and FMOs, and that will open the rest of the pipeline. So if you go back 3 years, the trading liquidity and institutional investors and retail being active was obviously lower. Saudi has always been active. So if you're referring to Saudi, no, the liquidity in Saudi has always been excellent. A large portion of the liquidity on the Saudi stock exchange is driven by retail. But after IPOs, that liquidity has improved in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. How can it continue improving? We need to see more allocations to institutional investors, no matter if it's international or locals, because they will be trading on the stock in the aftermarket. So that liquidity will continue to improve.
Rudi, where do you see the opportunities in the region?
Opportunities honestly are coming from the mid-segment. So if you look back over the past 2, 3, 4 years, we've seen mega IPOs, very large IPOs in both UAE and Saudi Arabia. Today, if you look at the mid-segment, they are the most active. So this is one opportunity, which is fantastic. That shows you how much the Saudi market specifically is actually very mature. You see private companies going public, you see smaller IPOs, and they still attract international and regional investors, which is a big plus. Number two, where I would like to see more activity is healthcare, consumer, retail, and tech. I really hope that we start to see more tech IPOs going public. How do we convince the tech companies to go public? Lower addiction to dividend yield and start valuing growth, because this is how we promote the market.
Where should we invest?
You should invest, I think in the sectors that I mentioned.